So, Ulla, are you ready next to your cycling bridge in Copenhagen to tell us how and why Cycling Without Age started?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Lovely. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So I've positioned myself right between all the evening swimmers, the cyclists, and the evening strollers in Copenhagen. Just to rub it in. It's a beautiful evening, and I promise you, Copenhagen isn't always like this. In fact, we always say, you know, Copenhagen wasn't always Copenhagen, and Copenhagen isn't always Copenhagen. But it's a pretty good evening tonight. And I'm really delighted to be with you. I've got Pernilla, my brother, sitting just a little bit further down the quay, just to avoid the echo. And Pernilla and I, we've secretly been stalking Cyclox, and we're deeply impressed. And we can't wait until the borders are open again so that we can come and ride with you. Is that okay with you?
Very much so.
Thumbs up. Yes, so I'll try and have a little talk about how Cycling Without Age came to be, which is actually this year is going to be nearly 8 years ago now. And it started really one fine morning when I was riding my bike to work. And to me, that's just the best way to start the day. And just around the corner from where I live, there's a care home, and next to that there's a church, and in front of that there's a bench. And there was this really nice elderly gentleman sitting there on the bench, enjoying the sun and greeting all the passers-by. And he greeted me with this friendly nod, and I tried to reciprocate while on my bike, and I think I nearly fell off my bike trying to, you know, to be stylish. And then I just rode on, and that greeting really stayed with me, because it reminded me of my own dad, who he died at quite a young age. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was just a small kid, and then he was pretty soon in a wheelchair, and I saw firsthand the impact that it had on him as a person, but also us as a family. Of course, immediately he lost his mobility. He lost his ability to move around the local community. And pretty soon his friends stopped coming by as well. And as a family, we felt how that had an impact on the social isolation and the loneliness of a disease like that. And that's exactly what we see happening to our elders as well in care homes, and those of old age living at home on their own. And so I think that thought probably stuck with me for a few days. And I kept thinking, and you've probably seen, you know, here, you've probably seen several cargo bikes rolling past as well. We have a lot of those in Copenhagen, and I have two myself. But I thought, you know, I can't put this elderly gentleman into a box bike. So I found this old Trishaw, which is really like a cycle rickshaw. And then I just showed up at the local care home and offered bike rides. And actually, just a few weeks, I was out riding with this man that I met on the bench, and found out that his name was Torkil. He was 94 years of age, and we started riding a lot, and actually developed into a friendship. And it gave me lots of stories, and it gave me also an opportunity to meet new people and to build new relationships with a lot of those residents living in that care home. A lot of those stories that would have otherwise got lost. And I have this amazing stash of stories of stories that I've been told firsthand by people rolling through Copenhagen, being told about, you know, this spot is where I met my wife, and this is where, you know, I even rode with this lady who told me, you know where those high rises are? This is where there were little allotments back during the Second World War. And my husband and I, we were in the resistance. I mean, she was in her 90s, and this is like 5 or 6 years ago. and I hid guns under the floorboards, and you know, I was really good at you know, doing what I did back then, but just, you know, it would give me goosebumps to uncover stories like that. And then when about 6 months later I found funding for the first small fleet of Trishaws, I really already had my first probably about 30 passengers that I'd already been taking out for bike rides. And people were literally queuing up to become volunteers as well, because I'd obviously talked about it to my friends and to people that stopped us on the street. And it was also probably around that time that that we did something that later on turned out to be really important. Because when we started to become more and more people involved, we also spent time talking about what we were all about, because it was quite a new thing what we were doing. And I knew myself that my own motivation for starting Cycling Without Age was kindness and generosity. I wanted to do something, I wanted to give back somehow. And I felt that I was giving back to my dad, although he died 25 years earlier. And I felt really a great satisfaction in being able to help those who were in need. And what I also found was that most others were driven by that exact same thing too. And maybe you have been attracted to Cycling Without Age for that exact same reason as well. But we also saw that all those stories that people were sharing while we were on these rides, you know, they very often became the basis for new relations, really, and new friendships. And so our first 3 guiding principles, and those were the things that we started talking about, were generosity and storytelling and relationships. And pretty soon after, we also added slowness, because we realized that slowing down is really important for being present and using our all-important senses. Because we do have a tendency to be too busy in our lives these days, and it tends to, you know, life is at too fast a pace, particularly for maybe for elderly people who may, you know, have trouble moving about. And the final one that we added was without age. And really that is because we realized that there is, unfortunately, an incredible amount of discrimination going on in our societies based on age, ageism, as you know, it's also called. And that has got to be tackled. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on as well. And actually today, nearly 8 years later, those 5 guiding principles, they are still with us. And we're now about 33,000 volunteers, or at least I can say that about 33,000 people have been trained to become pilots in Cycling Without Age. And we're in maybe around 50 countries right now. And they all subscribe to those guiding principles. And all affiliates, all chapters, and many volunteers, they take what we call the CWA Generosity Pledge, because we believe it is important to state our intentions clearly. I've always felt that, you know, companies who have value statements and so on, and they're like just posters on the wall. I believe that guiding principles and values, they have to be shared, they have to be discussed, and conversations need to be had about what they mean, so they are alive and vibrant, right? So the Cycling Without Age Generosity Pledge, and maybe we can all take it right now. It is, I promise to be kind, generous, and to show solidarity, to let others borrow my Trishaw, to help others fundraise, and to share my resources with my local and global community. And then you all say, yes, please, I totally agree. You don't have to unmute, but just say it, okay?
Yes.
So why is this all important, you know? Well, I believe that the fabric of any organization or movement will always be built upon really strong values and principles. And that culture comes from living those principles. Now you're from, I guess most of you are probably from England. And so you understand ship navigation, right? Well, if you're setting out on a journey by boat from, say, Southampton or Liverpool across the Atlantic, then just 1 or 2 degrees off course can mean that when you arrive in America, you will be thousands of miles away from your destination. And so my firm belief is that the benefit of being a principle-driven organization is that you can exercise much less control. And in Cycling Without Age, we choose to trust people. And as you also know, trust breeds trust. And we tell everyone who joins us that, and actually we get probably about up to towards 100 new volunteers every single day around the world, that as long as they follow our 5 guiding principles, they get to decide how they do it, how they run their local CWH chapter. And so bear that in mind as well as you develop your wonderful Oxfordshire chapter. And of course we connect you and we connect everyone into our global network and give people buddies to learn from, because we also believe that you can learn a huge amount from people around the world, because we've seen that like in Canada, for instance, in the Rockies, they have trishaws positioned in libraries. In other places, they do things in a completely different way. They take also people with physical disabilities out for bike rides. And I believe that that is the ultimate empowerment to be creative and to innovate. And I think the result is that probably about 99% or more of all new ideas in Cycling Without Age, they come from the global network, not from me or from some central innovation task force. And that's because we operate as a decentralized, I think it's called a holacracy, where all decisions are made by independent teams around. And we're all change makers. It's very important for me to state as well that each and every one of us is empowered to be a change maker. And we feel strongly about our purpose and our mission. And I'd like to just take one example of how all of that is being developed locally by everyone. Take the concept of long rides. And some of you may have seen the documentary that was made about the ride between Denmark and Norway, but we've done lots and lots of these long rides. And that crazy idea of cycling hundreds of miles over several days with a whole convoy of trishaws and a dozen elders came from a guy called Soren. And he was a volunteer and also passionate about organizing rides, mainly for the Lycra crowd that would ride from Copenhagen to Paris and other fancy rides. And he said to me one day, don't you think we could take these, how far do you think they could go, these trishaws? And I thought, I don't know, but and I knew immediately what he was getting at. So he started organizing this first long ride from Denmark to Germany, to Hamburg. And it was amazing. I mean, I think it was something that, for those of us who participated, it was something that we'll never forget. We made friends for life, but also just the fact that it was possible to do something like that with people who were well up in their 90s, take them out and ride for like 8 hours a day. And people were really tired at night, but they had really also enjoyed themselves. So that's one beautiful example of how the grassroots will come up with beautiful ideas. And I cannot wait to see what comes out of Oxfordshire as well. Now, I also feel I need to talk about the corona pandemic. And one of the biggest negative side effects of the corona pandemic is the social isolation and the loneliness experienced by our elders. And I guess that's worldwide. Both the elders living in care homes, separated from their families, if they have any, and elders living in their own homes as well. It has an enormous negative impact on their mental and physical health. And the thing is, that is actually also true about whole populations at the moment, or at least we are coming out of it now. But we've all been there, regardless of age and of physical and mental ability. And the difference is in societies we created over the last century, elders are no longer seen as an integrated part of families. They're no longer seen as kind of resources to be counted the way they were decades and maybe centuries ago. They were part of the family, they had a role. And it also saddens me a little bit to see that over the last 3 decades, this trend has really escalated. We've started building housing and care homes for elders far away from city and town centers. I have traveled to many, many countries and visited care homes. And I've also been shown by local politicians these state-of-the-art care homes that are beautiful, but they're located in the middle of nowhere, far away from the life that we all should be part of. And by doing so, our societies have socially excluded the elders even more. As I mentioned earlier, 2 of our 5 guiding principles are generosity and relationships, because we're fueled by generosity and we build relationships. And in fact, you're probably aware of this, but I think you can never state it often enough, but relationships are so important that social connectedness and close relationships are the 2 most important factors for life longevity and quality of life in old age. And it's far outweighing losing weight or quit smoking. We work with the amazing Susan Pinker, who's a psychologist and an author from Canada, from Montreal. She's written the book called The Village Effect, and she's done an amazing TED Talk that I encourage you all to watch. And she's talking about the importance of relationships. But Corona, at least up until now, has stopped probably about 99% of all our activities worldwide. And our elders are once again left alone inside. Now, the silver lining, I believe, is that we have now identified that the best time ever for people to really understand what our elders...
I was searching for the right term, but that's really respectful.
Our empathy levels are at an all-time high. We really get people because we feel the effects of isolation and loneliness in our own bodies and our own souls. So we've had several Zoom calls, and under the title, The Right to Relate, we now want to make relationships a human right. We want it up there, among all the other human rights. And by making relationships a human right, we're going to ensure that it must become the priority of everyone, not just a few people in our society, but everyone, from local governments, federal governments, businesses, families, all of us. And we must ensure that we design our society to make that happen. So now we're working on changing the system. So my dream is that we will spark a whole new movement of relationships between generations that will also serve to work at the mindset level, that we change our minds about who we choose to spend time with. And to do this, we need psychologists, we need sociologists, anthropologists, and companies, and local governments, marketing professionals, healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, and so on, to make all this happen on a big scale. So that when we're back from the lockdown, that we're ready, that we've created something strong and lasting for our elders. They deserve so very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't know if we can unmute everybody to applaud, but well done. Well, that is inspiring. I wrote down 4 of them, but I think I missed your 5th: generosity, relationships, slowness, stories, and what was the 5th?
Without age.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's okay. Thank you. Now, are there any questions that people would like to ask Ole at this stage? I'm just looking down the chat.
Have the authorities given much help? The sort of ponderous top-down people?
Yes, I think, we are obviously grassroots, but we also work top-down in terms of getting the support and the help from the local government. Now, when I first started, I got the first funding from the city of Copenhagen. They agreed to fund the first 5 bikes, and I guess from around when I look at chapters or branches around the world, a lot of them they get funding from local governments as well. we also work with national governments in some countries, and we also tend to really work very individually with like care homes and other official bodies as well that would help us in different ways. Then, of course, in terms of funding, we have foundations, we have collaborations with private businesses and so on. So it really comes at all different levels.
Thank you. Sarah and Leo, can you hear me? And are you unmuted? Would you like to
yes,
ask your question?
Thank you so much. That was such an interesting talk. My question is, in your experience, do you find that more people the elderly people who are using these rides, are they normally people who have enjoyed cycling before, or are they normally people who have never cycled before?
That's actually a very good question. And the answer to that question is actually that it's both. Now, when I first started, I had no idea that this could actually work in any other city, because of course Copenhagen is a great cycling city, and so I thought maybe we can just do this because people are just accustomed to this. But as we have spread throughout the world, I have visited the most amazing places that I thought it was never going to be able to happen. Like, for instance, I was in one of the cities of Los Angeles, and I met with some of the local politicians, and I rode with people. A lot of them had never been on a bike before, and they loved it. So I think, of course, if you have a history of cycling that maybe goes back to your childhood and all through your adulthood, I think it'll have an extra layer as well. But I've also found that people who have never cycled or have maybe only cycled as a child will appreciate it immensely. And I sometimes do this wonderful little exercise where I take people on a time journey with me, and we travel back to the day where they got their first bike, and then we all get back on those bikes together while we're back in time, and our eyes closed, and then we go out riding, and we have our eyes closed, and we think about the feelings that we have, and everybody can understand what it's all about. And when I then afterwards ask people, what were those emotions that came up? And it's all about freedom, and it's all about joy and excitement and so on, and happiness. So I think we all, regardless really of whether we have a long history of cycling, and even if we've cycled as adults, cycling to us, to humans, is associated with just freedom and happiness, really.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, that so resonates with what Muir was going to say. He wants to get people virtually cycling through places that they remember from their childhood, and the technology is not that difficult to achieve that sort of thing, and also cycling with other people even though they may be somewhere else. One of the things, I think your Trishaws take 2 people. Is that right, that you have room in the front, as it were, for 2 people? And we wondered if they also develop a friendship that may not have been there before.
Yes, absolutely. And you can see the Trishaw in one of the pictures up there in the center.
Oh, yes, yes.
And it's actually the widest model. It's really wide. The seat width is 1 meter. So actually, it will actually seat 3 little people, three slim adults, right? But usually the Trishaw will fit two grown-ups at the front. And yes, absolutely, there are these amazing stories of passengers who have met each other and developed friendships while they were at the front. And actually, I will encourage you to go into to the front page of cyclingwithoutage.org, the international site, and scroll down and find the documentary called The Gray Escape. Not The Great Escape, but The Gray Escape. It's like a 30-minute documentary, and it was actually done by this tremendous young British filmmaker called Michael Dorgan, who came over and spent a whole week filming with us, cycling from Denmark to Norway. And it features this amazing pair. You know, they didn't know each other before, because she's from somewhere in the suburbs of Copenhagen and he's from somewhere in the provinces. And they got seated next to each other. And she, Marie, during that ride, she was 96 and he was 81. And he was flirting very heavily with her all the way. And you will enjoy this so much. And then at one point, you know, they're sort of being interviewed individually. And he says, no, you know, she didn't really want me. She thought I was too young. He was 81. And she said when she was interviewed on her own, she said, no, he doesn't want an old hag like me. So, so she, they just had the most amazing, they've developed the most amazing friendship as they were going along on this ride. And they stayed friends for a long time, even if they didn't live in
Oh, that's lovely.
A question from Louise.
Yes,
sorry, Andy.
Well, I think I've just asked Louise, and I think we've covered it. She was asking, and I think probably if we move on to Kiran, we'll be able to see a Trishaw for real. So thank you, Ole, and I'm sure you'll stay with us for the next part. Can we hear from Kiran, who is somewhere in the middle of Oxford?
So, shall I start?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, okay, no problem. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Andy and Alison and the Cyclox family, and thank you, Ole, for your time, sharing your time with us. And you know, you're an inspiration to us. That's why we started this charity here. And surely, as a change maker, he's affected many people around the world, and hopefully that will long may that continue. So my name is Kiran Audit. And this is Richard MacKenzie, and we're 2 of 5 trustees of Cycling Without Edge Oxfordshire, which is a charity set up in March. And this is our first Trishaw here, which you can see next to the Radcliffe camera in Oxford, which I'm sure many of you will know. Ole, you must come and visit sometime. I will start. I'm keeping social distancing, so 2 meters away. Is it okay if I start the presentation on my slide,
Yep.
Andy? Is that okay? So, okay, so broadcast. Okay. So yes, if you're seeing that, is that all good?
Yep, well done.
Yes, thank you. So I'll just start with what we're going to be talking about, just giving a quick background of the charity and our trustees, and then I'll briefly talk about our goals for the next 12 months and our response to COVID-19 and how we think we'll be able to continue the good work going forward. And finally, more importantly, how we hope that this will have sparked some interest in the Cyclox family to become more involved, and how you can get involved and become an ambassador for Cycling Without Age, hopefully. So without further ado, how did it all start? Well, my name's Kiran. I own and operate care homes in Oxford. And I met Richard in October, and we decided that this idea was just amazing. And Ole's TED talk really inspired us to really try and bring this to Oxfordshire. And I'll go through the bios. You can probably get that from the slides present. We can make that available afterwards, the slides, hopefully. So Richard MacKenzie, he's our Oxford cycling gardener, and is very involved with cycling and generally and everything else to do with it. We have Suzanne Williams, and she's also on the Zoom call here, and she's joined us as a trustee, worked with Oxfam and many other large charities and international development organizations around the world. And we have Tim, who's also on the call here, works with the Oxford City Council in the waterways as a manager there, and has really inspired us to move forward with lots of various aspects of Cycling Without Age Oxfordshire and bringing this to reality. And finally, we have Dr. Janet Horrocks, who's also on the call, and her love for the outdoors and cycling is trying to bring this together. So that's briefly about us. The Trishaw that we have here is, we got it in June 2020, and we've already seen, we've already taken it to some care homes in Kennington and Oxford and in Woodstock. It's made in Holland. It's battery assisted, and it's cadence. Is it cadence powered? Is that the right word? Cadence, Richard? So pedelec. Right, electric assist pedaling. So when you move the pedals, it starts, it assists you to move that. And that's great when you have people and passengers on the Trishaw. It allows you to move safely and securely, and gives you that boost when you need it, when you're at a traffic light, for example. So it's very safe, very comfortable, great suspension. And one thing that's great about this is that the footrest can drop down. So people with mobility restrictions and difficulties of raising their legs can safely board and sit onto the front of the Trishaw, which is brilliant. What we're going to be doing in the next few months is basically, we would normally have liked, as Ole was saying, we'd normally have liked to have trained volunteers and engage volunteers to take passengers out. But with COVID-19, as we all know, that's highly going to be unlikely until a vaccination program's in place. So what we're thinking of doing, and what we're hoping to do in the next few weeks, is to work with care homes and start training carers in care homes to become pilots, and starting very safely and learning along the way about how to do that in a safe manner. We're developing at the moment some infection control procedures and PPE. We would recommend that they would have PPE, and we're also working on various policies to relation to safeguarding for both the volunteers and the passengers. And in essence, the volunteers who are carers, they're working with the care residents in the care homes themselves. So in a sense that they're already in contact and giving personal care to those residents. So carers in care homes, they're already following strict infection control procedures, which is outlined by the Public Health England. And how we see it as going forward is that some of the examples that we'll do is we will probably have routine cleaning pre and post journeys. Carers would be wearing, on Trishaws, will be wearing PPE masks and gloves, and we'll be recommending on certain routes that are less busy and maintaining a 2-meter distance in general public. These trials will start this week and in the next couple of weeks with my care homes in Kennington, and we're also in discussions with care homes in Woodstock. And so hopefully this is going to bring some of that relief that we're hoping to bring to those people who are in isolation. These are the care homes that we're going to target in these areas. Although we've only got one Trishaw at the moment, we're going to try and spread this around the Kennington, Radley and Iffley area, the Blackwood, Lees, Rosehill and Headington area, and the Kidlington, Woodstock and Yarnton area. And it's important to note that that when we're working with the care homes and the care managers there, we will try to encourage taking carers or training carers who are on the regular COVID-19 testing and making sure that they're negative, and also choosing passengers who are fit and healthy, who are not going to be at risk. So risk assessment is key in this situation, and it's quite a delicate way to move forward. But we want to try to hit the ground running, and we want to try to make a difference as best we can in these uncertain times at the moment. Partnerships. Our charity, we're going to work with the Oxford Health an Oxfordshire Health and Wellbeing Board for Buckingham, and also the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, Berkshire West Integrated Care Services, which is also known as BOBS. We feel that there's a lot of similarities in the aims and the objectives of those boards, and we want to try to, in the next coming months, work with them to try to develop some surveys and focused measurable studies to see what we can measure in terms of the impact of these rides in certain areas. This is probably more long term, and once we're able to get up and running with Trishaws and hopefully get more volunteers involved rather than having carers. But we do want to see how we can measure these impacts of rides in many different ways, and working with these two larger local boards will help us in that aim. They have very similar aims and objectives to the Cycling Without Age Oxfordshire aims. So currently we have one Trishaw, and we've been really fortunate to get this. We're fundraising for 2 more Trishaws. A Trishaw costs around £10,000 approximately. That's with so giving for insurance for 1 year and maintenance for 1 part. And if one Trishaw can provide 3 rides every day, that's almost 2,200 resident miles in a year for one Trishaw. So we want to try to expand that and maybe get that to 6,000 miles by the end of the year in terms of our activities and getting people out. So finally, how can you get involved? Like we were saying, like sharing our time and experience and stories will build our communities and try and build those relationships with other citizens amongst us. A lot what Ole was touching on earlier on. And these are sort of things that we're looking at the moment. Volunteers to help train our carers become safe pilots. Some of you who are probably very experienced cyclists out there can get in touch with us. We are going to work with care home providers. We're happy to open that discussion to more providers and even domiciliary care providers if there are any out there. We're looking for volunteers in terms of bike coordinators, volunteer managers, and a safeguarding lead officer, and also an experienced treasurer. So if anyone's interested in joining us and growing this, we'd be really, really happy to talk to you. One of the examples that we're doing right now in terms of community fundraising is going to our Just Giving page, and you can click on an orange button there to start fundraising. And here's an example of Bob, which is Richard's son, who's already raised, I think at that time it was £305. It's probably gone up even more since then. So but it's very easy, and we want to bring in every small bit counts. You know, if 10 volunteers can raise £50, that's £500 that would cover insurance and maintenance for one bike. So every small little bit counts, and we would really appreciate your input and involvement. Those are our details on the end there, and we're happy to share this slide with you, Andy, if you wanted to send it to anyone so that you've got all the contact details. But I'll just end this little broadcast so we can go back to hopefully the main screen. If you can see me, I don't know if you can see.
You have?
Yes, yes, brilliant. So yes, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that covers it in a brief amount. I don't know if we can add any more. Do you want to add any more, Richard, to that?
I'll unmute myself, and I'll just say, as a cyclist, it's actually I can hear myself, so I'm just going to take that out for a minute because I can hear myself through yours. But as a cyclist, it's a really fun bike to ride, and it's great being out on the road. People really do give you the space. It's a strange bike to ride because I'm used to 2 wheels, and this has got 3. So with the camber of the road, it's you don't lean in when you're going around corners and things. But yeah, just as a cycling point of view, because I know most of you on the call tonight are going to be cyclists, if you're thinking about volunteering, it's a heck of a lot of fun to be riding it.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I see a few questions. Mary Clarkson would like to ask you, Kiran. Mary, are you there?
Yes, I am. And yeah, thanks ever such a lot. It's just really inspiring and exciting. My question was, I'm a city councillor in Marston, and I've got huge numbers of single elderly people still living in their own homes. But often loneliness is one of the biggest problems that I come across. And it would be wonderful if we could set up some kind of system where we could engage them too, as well as the people in care homes. And I wondered if trying to find safeguarding ways and ways of involving them is something that we could perhaps look at.
Absolutely. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can hear me. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's quite a fluid situation. With the restrictions and the guidelines, and we've definitely would love to reach out to people who are living alone in homes, and maybe my first idea thinking is that perhaps going through the domiciliary care provider that's giving them care support, and trying to get someone who's regularly personally caring them there to be able to take them on a ride to reduce the risk of a volunteer at this stage, because I think it's going to be difficult with the restrictions at the moment and the distancing. It is less than 2 meters for someone who's not regularly providing personal care to someone. So I think it's definitely something we want to do in the future for sure. Immediately, perhaps there's a way we could get around it by training domiciliary care providers for people who are actually giving care there to be able to do that ride.
Thank you. David Wilson has a question. He lives in Headington. I don't know if he's unmuted. Can you hear me, David? Do you want to ask your question to Kiran? I'm not sure that I can just quickly find him. There he is. David, are you there? Well, I'll ask the question for him. He wondered how the Trishaw coped with hills, and I wondered what the range was. And
yeah, you can. Yeah, can I pass that to Richard?
Of course.
Okay, so today I went up a hill with some weights, and yeah, it went good. It is like just riding a bike up a hill. You've got the electric assist, you've got 3 levels of assist, and I was carrying quite a bit of weight, so I went on to 3, and pretty much sailed up using the gears just as normal. I dropped down into 2nd gear and sailed up. I think if you're going to manage Headington Hill on your usual bike, you're definitely going to be able to manage it on this bike. It's still going to be difficult. It's a hill, but the electric certainly does take the bite out of it. And within regards to, am I still on? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, within regards to range, it really depends, because actually if I just move my camera, you probably see the controls here. Can you see that okay? Yeah?
You're on a still.
It's still
stuck on my face, is it? Okay, cool. Okay, well basically there's a control here on the handlebars. I'll just explain it. And it's got 3 different levels. And what I found is that if I run it on level 3, now today I came down from Shipton on Cherwell to Kennington, so I'm guessing, oh, you've got the camera there, so you'll think you'll have to speak, Kiran. Okay, no worries. But yeah, I came down from, because I was feeling rather lazy, I came down from Shipton on Cherwell to Kennington, which I guess is going to be about 10 miles or so. On level 3, I used one of the bars. So there's 5 bars. So I used 20% of the power in doing that. And it took me about 45 minutes. So on level 3, there's at least a good couple of hours of cycling. We went into Woodstock on Friday, and I think I used 3 bars of electricity over the period of about 5 hours. And that was going between, because it's quite flat over between Shipton and going around Woodstock, it was going between levels 1 and 2, with a little bit of 3 on the hill as well. So it's got good range. And I did notice somebody else's question. Oh, and you can add 2 batteries, which will make the range greater. I noticed somebody else's question about moving the bike from like Headington or Kennington to Woodstock. And yeah, we're going to keep this all cycle all the way. And so part of volunteering won't necessarily just be volunteering to train or to take people out, but to move the bike from A to B from when we want it as well. So logistic, basically.
Thank you for that. Steve Unwin, who is involved with Wheels for All, I'd like to hear from him how the 2 charities would complement each other. Steve, are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, I help run Wheels for All, which is providing cycling facilities for a whole range of people, disabled people and elderly people. We're based at the Horse Path running track. I mean, we're hoping to cooperate with CWA. I mean, we sort of complement each other and potentially overlap and can help each other. I mean, we have a couple of side-by-side bicycles. At the moment, they're not e-assist, but we have people riding around the Horse Path running track on those, and it's very, very sociable. And it's particularly good for elderly couples. They do need to be cycled, so that they either get taken around by a carer or one of the volunteers, or they can cycle each other. But we're also hoping to get an electric side-by-side, which will potentially enable us to get out and about beyond the track. And so that's where we might help with CWA, and of course they can come down and visit us and cycle around the track and talk to yet more people. So just wanted to make sure people were aware of us, and we look forward to working with CWA.
Can I just say, actually, Steve, you've actually come up in our meetings before, and we had the guys, I think that you know them from Gloucester. Is Steve still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
I can't even remember who the provider was, but we're going to be looking at some different types of bikes going forward as well.
Right.
And we did mention in the meeting that we'd love to be able to do that with you guys together. So when they come up to do the demonstration, that we all meet together and see what we can do together as well.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm not quite with Ole. I mean, I don't know if he's still here, but I understood that they only use Trishaws. Is that wrong? Do they use electric side-by-sides as well?
I think there are some. Well, Van Ram do a side-by-side, which.
Yeah.
But Ole might be able to answer that more precisely than me.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I think there's plenty of scope for us to work together.
Yeah. There are many different types of bikes. They also produce a wheelchair bike.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we have one of those.
And Nihola, they produce beautiful wheelchair bikes as well. So there are many opportunities. We do, of course, try to encourage that people, even if they are in wheelchairs, and I can speak from my dad as well, who was in a wheelchair. He loved nothing better than being able to escape his wheelchair. So if there is a way that you can get people who are normally stuck in wheelchairs, get them onto the Trishaw, it makes a huge difference, because it also means that suddenly they're seen for who they are as a person, rather than maybe just for someone who has a physical handicap. So if you can at all get people into the Trishaw, then by all means do that.
Do you mind if I come in there, Andy?
Yes, please, Damien.
So Ole, it's a really good point, and I think a lot of people know here I have a profoundly disabled son, and I've got a chariot that he rides behind me. And my question to the group, and question to Richard and Kiran actually was, in the situation where, well, he can't transfer, okay, so he rides behind me in his wheelchair, and I'm thinking about potentially offering, could I offer my services with that chariot and my e-bike in addition to those people that maybe can't transfer, who require to be in their wheelchair, who really haven't experienced cycling before because they're stuck in their wheelchair, and that opportunity really is difficult.
Yeah, I think that sounds like something we could definitely look into for sure. Because obviously we've only raised funding just for one bike at the moment, but collaboration and being able to pool resources is definitely something that is the right way forward. Sometimes it's not always about funding. Sometimes the resources are there, and we just have to be able to adapt it. And I think that would welcome that if we can. So be happy to take that discussion further for sure. I think with the board and everyone else. Yeah.
I think it's cool. I think that Steve's question and Amy's, what Ole was saying earlier about you've got these governing principles. I think
you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got these governing principles, but really, it being in Oxfordshire, we can make this as unique as we want it to be, and so all of these ideas is really good, and it will be lovely to grow and let the community make it what it needs to be here in Oxfordshire.
Thank you. I'm hoping that Muir Gray can join us now. Muir, thank you very much, Kiran, and we'll hand over to Muir, and then Alison will close the meeting after that. But Muir, are you with us now?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Hooray.
No.
We could hear you.
Yes, I'm just going to set up some pictures to show you what we've been doing. And the principle is that I fully support everything that's been said. I'm going to say a little bit about what we've been discussing following the conference in Oxford. So just to summarize, the number of people aged over 80 will double in the next 10 to 15 years, people like me, for example. And the number of people aged 20 to 60 is not going to increase. So there's a huge issue coming up. And the key to it is to prevent or delay dementia, frailty, and the need for social care. And cycling has a key part to play in that. And we've got an audience of people enthusiastic about cycling. And I'm just going to say a little bit about what came up at the conference and the work we're doing. So just to summarize the evidence base that we've got for this, firstly, the important principle is that aging is not a problem until the late 90s. And here's some examples of people. You need a bit of luck, of course. Luck to be born to parents. Parents who value education seems to be the most important thing rather than genetics. And you need a bit of luck to avoid Parkinson's and rheumatoid and the disease we can't prevent. But aging is not the problem. There's three other processes. And the other processes are loss of fitness, disease, and the number one problem, negative beliefs and attitudes. So let's just take the concept of the fitness gap. This is the first process. So for almost all of us, the turning point occurs in early 20s. Enthusiastic cyclists may keep going till they're about 40, but most people get their first sitting job at 22, the first car, and from then on it's downhill all the way with a widening fitness gap. The second process that affects us if we live longer is disease. Not because of aging, but because of living longer in a certain environment and in certain ways. And you can see here the fitness gap gets wider faster, partly because of disease. So I had a myocardial infarction 6 years ago, so I lost a bit of cardiac muscle. But the other problem here is the negative beliefs and attitudes. That people say, well, mum's struggling to get to the shops, so we'll send groceries to her. So the fitness gap gets wider, and you may drop below what is called, I haven't got this yet adopted by the International Classification of Disease, the line. And this is the level of ability that you need to get to the toilet in time. And once you're below the line, game over. Social care or something is required. The evidence is that at any point, and this would also apply to acute medical problems, you may be referred to the John Radcliffe, not because of an acute chest infection, but because it precipitates. You have no reserve left to cope with chest infection. So the key is what we call 3D fitness. And we heard very well from Copenhagen. I always like learning from the Danes. They're quite like us, the Danes, and I'm not from England, as you can probably tell. They're a bit more they're more argumentative than the Swedes or the Norwegians, so it's much more relevant what you've managed to do there, which is wonderful. So 3D fitness, emotional, cognitive, and physical. And we're also addressing the issue of, is the word care the right word? I've long campaigned against it. I think caring is a nice emotional task, but what we find is the word care means doing things for people. And we've got this particular issue, and I've just published in the British Medical Journal what I call the second pandemic, which is the decompensation, the deconditioning that occurs. And I think we're going to see a huge increase in demand for health and social care as a result of lockdown. So what do we want? Purpose. And the evidence, very interesting, the first article in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2020 was headed Longevity Prescription for the 21st Century. And it was written by a distinguished lab scientist, but the article's subtitle was Regaining Purpose, Building and Maintaining Social Engagement, and Having a Positive Lifestyle. So what we've been looking at is, could we get 500,000, this is for Oxfordshire now, and I'm thinking of Mary Clarkson's point, could we get 500,000 people, that would be 5,000 people in Oxfordshire back on a bike on the road. And then could we get 5,000 people in Oxfordshire cycling at home? Or if they're in a home, a nursing home or care home. But what we're looking at are ways in which you could be cycling, first of all, in a group. And those of you who've got teenage boys will know all about Fortnite. But it's with virtual reality, it's very easy now for, I could find 8 or 10 friends from school, and we could cycle Land's End to John O'Groats, half an hour a day, or through the Swiss Alps, or wonderful cycling opportunities. But I think those groups should have a social purpose. And I think everyone needs a social purpose. It does seem to be perhaps the most important thing. The Japanese call it ikigai. So what we're thinking about, and I'm working at the moment in a number of populations, Sheffield and Plymouth and Lancashire. Not yet, everything's very difficult in Oxford. So much more difficult in Oxford, I can tell you. But the idea of purpose, so, and even in care homes, I would like teams in care homes competing with one another, but competing to raise funds for, say, the World Wildlife Trust or the Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire and Bucks Wildlife Trust, so that older people are raising resources to help younger people and to help the environment and the climate in 20 or 30 or 50 years' time, well after my time. In terms of fully support what you're doing, I would like to see, and maybe we do this in Oxford, looking at the rickshaws. I'm also concerned that the people who get electric scooters, many of them have actually got leg power left. And you've got to keep your quadriceps strong. Okay, if you don't keep your quadriceps strong, you'll drop below the line. We've also been looking at ways in which you can have pedals with your hands, because it turns something which turns something else. And it's, I know we use our feet to cycle, but we could do it this way too. So it'd be very interesting if we could look at ways in which we could make Oxford the first place where there was maybe the side-by-side that Damien mentioned is a way to go. But I would like to see people have the opportunity for working, making a contribution, having a purpose. And as I say, my ambition, I think, would be to have a cycling match between Oxford and Cambridge of people aged over 80. And you can find that in every part of the country. Leeds and Sheffield, even Bognor and Chichester hate one another and would compete to raise more resources for a good cause. So terrific what's been done in Denmark. We're looking with much bigger numbers. Mary, you're lots of people. I can picture New Marston. There'll be lots of people living on their own. And isolation is now recognized as a major risk factor for dementia. So we have to tackle isolation. We have to tackle loss of purpose, and more conventional medical treatment is not the answer. And I believe that cycling and cyclists have a very important part to play in reducing the need for social care. Andy, that's what we've been discussing.
Thank you, Muir. Inspiring as always, and fits so well with what Ula and Richard and Kiran are doing. I love the idea of purpose, and it's so true. Now, I think if we unmute everybody and just give people a chance, if there are any questions towards the end before we ask Alison Hill to thank our speakers and close the meeting. Do people want to ask any of the presenters so far? Not sure if I have.
Craig had a question about barriers, I think.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, I can answer the barrier one. So it's 1.1 meter, no, 1.11 meters wide. And so most of the barriers we can get through. There are a few that are, so for instance, coming from Kennington, which is one of our bases, we can't come down the national cycle route into town because there are too many bollards in the middle of pathways, which is a cycleway, which is a little bit frustrating. It's also difficult to go over the river crossing it would be north on the Thames, north of Folly Bridge. There's a little footbridge there and cycle bridge. So it's difficult to go over there. So there are places that it is difficult, but we're hoping to map those and get onto the council about those so that we can make sure that we can get a good coverage. But yeah, I mean, pretty much most places it can get through. And it has, I mean, it's done a fair few miles since we've had it. So it's been well tested. One of the other questions I think that Craig was putting is how do drivers respond? Interestingly today I had a close pass just pulling into Kennington, which was incredibly clse. It was actually, I thought it would have actually hit going. I was overtaking a car that was parked and then he overtook me, and I had to pull up on the path to do that. So. But usually, typically, people treat it like a car. And to be honest, it feels as wide. It's not as wide as a car, but it feels big when you're riding it. So you feel fine to own the lane, really. And I pretty much do that all the way.
Richard, sorry to butt in. It's exactly the same with the chariot. People absolutely go into the opposite side of the road as a general rule. It's really bizarre considering I'm so used to being close past in Oxford, and then once I've got Matthias on the back, it's just they completely avoid me. It's very interesting psychology.
I think it really also, the other thing is it changes the story in people's minds of what a cyclist is. That is my main reason for loving this bike, is the fact, just like my work bike, is it normalizes different types of cycling. And, you know, I can't wait for the day when we've got 10 of these or 20 of these just in Oxford City alone, and you won't be able to walk out your front door without seeing 2 of our elders in the front whizzing past, having the time of their lives. Because, you know, it's when we see things like this, and when we see Chris pedal and post and the Oxwash guys, that we can actually see that cycling is much more than just a kid's hobby, that it's real, that it's tangible, and that it's the future as well. So that's why I'm really excited about this project.
That is just briefly an opportunity. Our next meeting in a month's time is exactly looking at the role of bicycles, cargo bikes, to deal with freight in Oxford. And we're just putting together a speaker list, including Oxwash and Pedal and Post, because we do share entirely your view that that is the exciting future for transporting freight in Oxford, and by extension transporting people too. So thank you very much. I do shout out or get in touch. Galaxy Tab A has a question. Can you hoist people into this? Sorry not to be able to say who that is.
I think that's Janet, and I think I think you could.
Yeah,
I think you could. I think, yeah, Kiran's saying it depends on the hoist, and I think that would be the case. But I mean, it's very accessible. Let me just show you just quickly. So this whole thing here, the footrest. Actually, do you want to whack that down so that we can see? So the footrest completely drops, as if by magic. In a minute, yeah, it's good. Yeah, so the footrest drops, and the person will just come and stand on. Kiran, I can't do that and hold the phone at the same time. Do you want to stand on there? Yeah. And you'd stand on there, and then they could just go and sit. They wiggle their bum back and get into the seat, and then the footrest lifts up. But I guess if you look on the side, if somebody is hoisted in, you could just move this back. This is completely detachable. And just hoist them down, as long as they're going to be comfortable in the seat and it's got belts and things. It should be absolutely fine. But then, you know, it's going to be different. Like for Damien's son, you know, there is a bike that's got a ramp where you can sort of just reverse the wheelchair onto the front here, onto the whole section. And the wheelchair then becomes an integral part of the bike. So loads of possibilities.
It's good to see that. And Craig Simmons, Lord Mayor, makes the point, which we're always making as well, that an inclusive society would make sure that all the cycle infrastructure copes with trishaws, cargo bikes, trailers and so on. And I think that is the next generation of cycle infrastructure. We'll be thinking, how do we get a trishaw through? So thank you.
Can I just make a point for that? Because we have in Copenhagen, we have just over 40,000 cargo bikes. And so the standard right now is that all new cycle lanes, they actually have, it's wide enough for 2 cyclists to cycle side by side and be overtaken by a car. So it has to be at least 2.5 meters wide. So so that's a challenge for you, Lord Mayor.
Gosh.
Yeah.
The Oxfordshire cycling standards do state theoretically that any new cycling lanes should be 3 meters wide. So that's
better than Copenhagen then. We just need to implement it.
That's the difference.
Alison, shall I pass over to you to close the meeting? Thank you.
Yeah, well, that was a very inspirational meeting. Thank you all, and thank you, Ole, for allowing us to see Copenhagen and hear about the wonderful Cycling Without Age program that you've set up. I mean, it is inspirational. I think you've got 33,000 volunteers across the world. I will get you to say just a few words of farewell on behalf of the programme and yourself, but I just particularly wanted to say thank you as well to Richard and Kiran for the inspiration of setting up the programme in Oxford, and we will be donating large sums of money to make sure there are plenty more Trishaws around. And also, Muir, to thank you, because you have been an inspiration to us all, and many of us throughout most of my career anyway. And I just love the way you are promoting the purpose in life and not the care. And I think, again, thank you, Muir. So can I just finalise by asking Ole to say the last word, and before we close the session?
Well, thank you very much, Alison, and thank you so much, everyone. Kiran for grabbing it in Oxfordshire, and Richard as well, and all of you. It's very inspiring also to listen to you, Muir, talk about the program, and also the reasons why we should care about keep cycling as we grow older, and how important that is. And because it isn't just, as I always say, cycling isn't just a convenient means of transport. It's also a happy means of transport. It makes me happy to go cycling.
Yes.
And I also want you to know that you're part of a big global family. And I would like to just send you a warm welcome, because we do have chapters around the world. So if you do go traveling, go onto the website and find the Google map and zoom in on wherever you're going and hook up with the local chapter, wherever you might be going, even as far as New Zealand and Australia and Singapore, but throughout Europe and North America as well. Connect with them. And we also have an online resource bank called The Hood, where you can go in. It's called thehood.cyclingwithoutage.org. And if you go in there, you can get access to a wealth of information and knowledge, and connect with people as well. And then also, I would encourage you all to share stories. We have multiple Facebook groups and pages and so on, and I think it's such a wonderful thing to share stories. It inspires across, and when people have great new ideas, like they did in Lisbon about a month ago, when they organized for healthcare workers and psychologists to be passengers in the Trishaws and ride out to the isolated elders for what they call balcony talks, where they would help people with their, discuss problems and help solve them, and really just to lend an ear. That was a thing that immediately spread across many other countries and many other cities, simply because they shared that story. So I would encourage you to do that as well. And again, I would love to come and see you in Oxford as soon as I'm able to travel again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ole.
Thank you.